Hello and welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. This is a podcast to help you find peace with food and overcome disordered eating. And I'm Harriet Frew, aka the Eating Disorder Therapist. And I'm so excited to share with you all kinds of stories, tips, information and guest interviews to help you on your journey in finding peace with food. So thank you so much for listening today. So today I am talking to Ella Williams, who is a 27-year-old assistant clinical psychologist supporting young people who have experienced trauma and attachment difficulties. Ella is also an eating disorder survivor. She has battled with anorexia, starvation and bulimia for 12 years, but thankfully she is now well along the recovery path. After becoming extremely ill at dance college, Ella bravely took a new path and dropped out of dance and began studying psychology in Sheffield. Ella is coming on the podcast today to talk about her healing journey and the ups and downs along this road. She's also going to talk about how much her eating disorder has taught her about herself, her need to conform and fit in and be accepted by society. She says that she realises that it was never about food but ran much deeper. In the podcast as well, Ella is also going to talk about how carers can be supportive, and we're going to be referencing the new Maudsley animal model. As a carer of someone with an eating disorder, it's often so challenging to know how to support your loved one helpfully, and Ella gives some great tips and sharing, fresh from the trenches, on what parents and carers can really do to help. I know that you're going to find this conversation really insightful and it will inspire hope for the possibility of change and eating disorder recovery. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Ella. Let's get to the conversation. Hi, Ella. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
So, Ella, could I firstly get you to introduce yourself to the listeners, please?
Yes, of course. So my name's Ella Williams. I'm currently an assistant psychologist and work to support children in residential homes. I'm 27, just turned years of age, and I'm already going grey, and I'm embracing it.
Well, good for you, Ella.
Thank you.
What do you attribute the going grey to?
Oh, do you know what, Harriet? I'm not too sure. Is it genetics? But my mum's not going grey. But I think because I'm quite dark, it's just going grey naturally. And I thought, you know what? I can be a silver fox. I can do this.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think the silver fox look is quite a nice one, isn't it? There's quite a lot of people really rocking it at the moment.
Yeah, I do. Those are my inspirations right now.
So Ella, as well, just to acknowledge that obviously you have just turned 27, because I think when I did the intro for you, I have said that you were 26. So was your birthday very recently?
Yes, it was July the 10th, and it was a glorious sunny day. It's quite scary to think I'm 27. You don't really feel it, do you? I still feel like 18.
Yeah, it doesn't change because I'm quite a bit older than you and I still feel the same. So Ella, I know you have your sort of eating disorder recovery story to share with us today, and truly acknowledge you're sort of still on this healing road, although you have made substantial progress sort of through the woods. So can you sort of take us back really to sort of, and tell us a bit about your story and how you've struggled with eating disorders?
Yeah, of course. So it began at a really young age, actually. I remember I already had like puppy fat when I was younger. And I think that's completely normal, isn't it, for young girls to have puppy fat. But I remember kind of like staring in the mirror and holding it and wanting to be more like skinny girls. I think at that time as well, the models like Kate Moss, who were very tiny and very desirable in the media, was promoted. And then I turned 13 and I kind of hit puberty and I lost a bit of weight. And I think people noticed, and I got quite a lot of attention from that, praise as they do. And that kind of led me to stop eating. So my mum noticed it and she took me to see the GP. And we had a conversation with the GP, and I remember him saying, do you think your mum's being dramatic? And of course, I didn't know what it was. At the age of 13, you don't think, oh, I've got an eating disorder. I've got eating difficulties. There's just this voice in your head saying, don't eat. So we didn't support didn't come to fruition. And I'd say from 14 to 18, I struggled with my food. I would have periods where I wouldn't eat. And then when it came 4 o'clock, obviously I was absolutely starving. So I'd have like 2 packets of biscuits and then tea. And then the next day I wouldn't eat because I felt too uncomfortable. And then that kind of happened. During this process as well, it's so difficult, I think, to be a teenage girl because you're trying to find yourself. So I was kind of trying to find where I am, my identity, peer approval. And of course, being deemed skinny was kind of like a nice identity that I wanted to go towards. So that was kind of bubbling up. And then at 19, I wanted to be a dancer. And I was like, right, I'm going to dance. It's going to be amazing. So I did this dance class in Cardiff. And it was really, really, really good. I had such a passion and love for it. But as I became really more kind of delved into the dancing world, I realized that there was a lot of pressure on young women to look really petite and skinny. And I think it's really toxic, actually, the dance culture and the dance world, because I remember, my teacher, he was really lovely and supportive, but, he would comment on weight. And I think there was like internalized like fat phobia. So I remember being in a leotard and looking in the mirror every day. And then I think I associated being the best to being the skinniest. And that's when it kind of led to starvation, where I became very ill. I just wouldn't eat. The more weight I lost, ironically, was I felt fatter because obviously the brain is completely starved. So you have completely warped view of how you see yourself in the mirror. So it got to 6 months in the dance, and unfortunately I had to leave because I was too ill. I was very pale. I didn't have any energy. And during this period, it was quite difficult for me because, I wanted to be a dancer. And then who am I now? What's my identity? So I kind of lay in bed for a good couple of months. And then my mum's an opera singer, and she said, why don't we come to a school with special educational needs and sing? So I went there, and oh my God, Harriet, it was life-changing for me because it took me out of my own head, and it gave me a new purpose and a focus on others who were so accepting and non-judgmental. And from that, I had therapy, and my therapist said, why don't you do psychology? That would be amazing for you. And it wasn't, I went to see a therapist and it all worked out. It was magical. But what it did enable me was to open my eyes to the psychological world. And I went to Sheffield University. And it was during then I battled with bulimia. So I think it's quite common, when you starve yourself for so long, when you do reintroduce food, it feels very out of control and chaotic. So although I was really happy in Sheffield doing psychology and learning more about myself, I did develop bulimia. But through the years, it kind of got better and better. And then I finished my university degree, and it was still lurking. But I came back, and then I had lots of different roles. So one was a teaching assistant, and then a DBT practitioner. So it was all psychologically related, and it was helping young people as well, which I was really passionate about because I felt like I quite had a difficult start. And where I am now, so I haven't been bulimic in quite a long time, which is amazing. And I've had lots of different therapists on the way, and they've all been so helpful in their own way. And I do think it's a space of time and a reflection. And I also think, the brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25. And it can be so chaotic, and that can kind of bleed out into your relationship with food. So I think with a lot of kind of professional and personal development, growing and making new friends along the way and finding my authentic self, I am definitely on the road to recovery, but it was definitely a struggle.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Ella. Are you all right if I sort of pick up on a few bits from your story?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So, I was very struck, you sort of said you sort of, when you were 13, you sort of lost a bit of weight. I know sort of the age you are and all the media back then, it was very much sort of Kate Moss, wasn't it? Nicole Richie, these tiny, tiny people who often, not the greatest role models. So obviously there's a massive influence for you there around body image. Were there sort of any other factors in your life as well, in terms of other things that were going on that maybe had an influence on the eating disorder development?
I think it was more internal influence because ever since I was young, I didn't want to leave my mum. I was very scared of the world, and I was extremely sensitive, extremely sensitive. So I think, a lot of people with eating disorders, actually the majority, are very sensitive, caring people, and they care what other people think. So I think it was me comparing myself to other people's bodies, but I also think it was peer influence as well. So when I hit 13, I think I kind of got into a friendship group who weren't necessarily like me, in that it was a bit bitchy, it was a bit more competitive, there was rivalry. So I think, kind of controlling and restricting my eating made me feel more accepted, but it was also a sense of control. I didn't have a great time in school with my peers and friends, as with a lot of people, but I think that definitely impacted as well.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for sharing that. I think, as you said, in a way, I think many people with eating disorders are very sensitive people, aren't they? And, extremely caring of others. But the downside is, I think sometimes, we feel the world so intensely, don't we? We're very perceptive as to other people's feelings, we have that strong sense of empathy, but it can make the world feel a bit overwhelming at times.
Yeah, definitely. That's how I felt. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think your second point as well about sort of friendship groups as well. I think so many people I've worked with have described perhaps just feeling they didn't completely fit in at secondary school or earlier, or feeling a bit on the outside in some way, perhaps not feeling good enough. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think sadly it's quite a common experience of so many people just growing up, but it's not the kind of thing that's voiced. And we look at others and assume they've got it all together, but it's not true.
No, that's so true. And you know what, upon reflection, looking back, the girls that I struggled with, they had struggles too. And I speak openly with my group of friends who I'm still friends with in school. And at the time, you don't share it, but they said, God, I really struggled. And actually, when you look back, you think everyone has struggled with fitting in and peer identity and friendships. It's just people cope differently. And I guess, with some people, including myself, it was foods was the kind of way to kind of cope with it all, to kind of like repress your emotions, so you don't feel as much. And it was just like a maladaptive coping strategy, really, I think.
Sure. So do you want to say a little bit more about that, actually? So I think for many people it's not a conscious decision often, is it, to restrict food to maybe numb or distract from difficult feelings, but I think you're certainly not alone there in that. Perhaps the eating disorder sort of helped you at some points, do you think, when you were struggling?
Yeah, totally. Like initially, honestly, Harry, I do believe this. It was adaptive. It helped me loads when everything was chaos and everything felt overwhelming and my hormones and trying to fit in. I knew I could control my eating. People say, wow, you've got such good self-control. It makes you feel good. I think, by starving yourself, some of the immediate effects are you don't feel your feelings, you kind of disengage from the real world. And actually, if the real world's really, really painful, then that's useful. It's toxic, but it has utility.
Yeah, no, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? And I think as well, I think when you first contacted me as well, you said about how your eating disorder had taught you so much about perhaps your need to conform and be accepted. And do you think, although it's obviously maladaptive, do you think it really gave you that back then?
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people, it's diet culture, isn't it? It's pervasive, and it's, thank God it's changing now. I'm looking at Instagram and there's people promoting body diversity. But I remember at age 13, there wasn't any of that. It was, as you said, Kate Moss, Nicole Kidman, tiny, tiny, tiny. And if you want to fit in, you want your peer approval, you want to be attracted, you want to feel attracted as well, because it's a time of adolescence. By restricting your weight, you feel like you belong and that people accept you. And it's really funny, isn't it? Because I remember when I was younger, all I wanted to do was be like others. Like I just want to look like others, be like others. And I think as you grow older, you're like, actually, I really want to be different. Like, and you have more confidence in finding your own style and what you don't like and what you do like. And that's really celebrated. But I think when you're younger, it's so difficult growing up, because it's like, I want to be like you. I want to be like you. What is my identity? Let's all fit into one mold, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great point, isn't it? I think there's such a strong need, isn't there, to conform, particularly as an adolescent and as we go into emerging adulthood. Yeah, and that really sort of drives then, doesn't it, sort of comparisons with others. And once you get into that, and also with all the potential to compare yourself now with social media as well. It can be a very slippery slope, can't it, with sort of a real decline in your self-worth.
Oh, 100%, and I've had to limit my feed now because I'm thinking, I struggled growing up. But I think, for teenagers, who are, 14 or 15 now, my heart does go out to them because I'm thinking, gosh, look at this pressure. I didn't have that pressure as much. But yeah, it is pressurized to look a certain way. And it can become all consuming. And that's when the eating disorder gets really powerful, when you think all your worth is based on your body and making your body look smaller.
Yeah, and it sounds like for you that was sort of really exacerbated when you went to dance college.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, it was huge. There was such a focus, and you're in small leotards and tights, and you're constantly looking at your body every day. And I just remember the smaller I felt, the fatter I felt. And I think it's so important to go to the Minnesota starvation study here as well. Healthy men, and they restricted their calorific intake, and it impacted their mental function. They felt more anxious, distressed. And as you grow smaller, you look in the mirror and you feel fatter. You can actually see it. And what helped me as well was, I hated it at the time, but my mum took a picture of me and I could see it objectively. And I was like, but that's not what I see. And that's not how I feel. And half the time when you think you feel fat, you don't. You feel numb. You feel a bit repressed. You don't feel attractive. But I think that can get all muddied and blurred.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I think, when you're in the midst of an eating disorder, you are really quite confused, aren't you? You're quite detached from reality. You're quite cut off from your emotions, or perhaps occasionally your emotions are sort of spilling out in quite uncontrollable ways. It's all just a bit of a painful mixture, isn't it?
Oh, it's complete chaos, yeah.
You said as well about, obviously, like your mum, it sounds like was like trying to reach out to you and support you, and perhaps take the photo to try and give you a bit of a reality check. Did you find as well, when you're in the midst of your eating disorder, was your mum sort of able to reach you, or were you able to sort of confide in her at all, or did you sort of shut people out quite a lot when you were struggling?
Oh, do you know what, Harriet? That's absolutely such a good question. It's really ironic. So I always craved my mum's attention, so when I was younger, I never wanted to leave my mum. And I do think, my kind of style of attachment, anxious, ambivalent, kind of impacted that. But my mum reached out to me, but it depended on my mood. I remember she went a bit later on in dance college, she kind of took me to the GP again, and they weighed me and they said, if you were 2 pounds under, we can admit you, but because you're not, we can't provide a bed. And there's no blame here at all, because I know, things are inundated with work, but there's no support. But my mum did take me, and she did try and reach out to me. But I started sleeping in a bed at the age of 19, and my dad was in the other bed. And actually, when my mum spoke to someone, they were like, the more attention you give, the larger the eating disorder grows. And I know that sounds a bit ambivalent and a bit confusing, but if you play to the eating disorder where my mum's kind of stopped her life to take care of me, then the eating disorder gets that attention, and the more attention the eating disorder gets, I found the bigger it grew. So it's a really tricky balance for my mum of, we kind of say, don't be the kangaroo where you put me in the pouch and protect me from the world, but be a dolphin and swim beside me and kind of support me, but don't mollycoddle the eating disorder, because that's how it grows and gets power. But it's really tricky, isn't it, when your daughter's there and you want to support her. But I think if it becomes all consuming in the family, that's not necessarily helpful either.
Yeah, no, it's such great information you're sharing there, because I think it's really natural, isn't it, that when your daughter's struggling, or son, or any loved one is struggling, that if you're the parent or the carer or the spouse or partner, that you kind of want to take care of that person. And it's very tempting to sort of be the kangaroo with the joey, isn't it? As and for anyone that's listening that doesn't know what we're talking about with these animals, it's the New Maudsley animal model. So anyone, if you want to find out more about that, I'll try and remember to put in the show notes, but do Google as well, the New Maudsley animal model. And I've also got a podcast episode a few weeks ago which talks more about it. But it's a great model, isn't it, Ella, to kind of help carers understand the position they need to take in a way to be supportive of you, but as well not sort of almost feeding the eating disorder and making it bigger.
Yeah, it's so tricky. It's such a balance. And you know what? It's a trial and error process. You know, we've gone for years and years. And I think only really in the last 2 years, we've come to realize actually, you know, the more attention you feed. What I found beneficial as well for me with someone with an eating disorder and from my parents as well is if you say, Al, I'm leaving a plate of food on the side. You can have it if you want. If you don't, that's fine. You can have something else in the fridge. But I think the more people go, eat, 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 it gets really overwhelming, and actually you're more likely to fall and go, no, I won't eat. You know, the eating disorder is really rebellious and defiant. If you tell me to eat, I won't, because I'm in control. But if you say, hang on, here's a plate on the side, have it if you want, I found that really, really helpful because it took the pressure off and it made me feel still in control.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great, Ella, just you sharing some of the little nuances of this, because I think, you know, it sounds like if someone was saying to you, right, Ella, right, here's your plate of food I prepared for you, eat it now, that would probably feel quite what in the new Maudsley model we describe as the rhino, where perhaps there's quite directive communication. But if you're struggling with an eating disorder, it activates your rebel and then you're less likely to eat.
That's exactly what I found. And I think it's really important that obviously people with eating disorders, innately, they want some sort of control, like everyone. It kind of bleeds out in the form of eating disorder. But if people are able to support you whilst you empowering you and you still have a sense of control, that will make it, I suppose, easier. It's not easy to eat, you know, but easier to eat, I think.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're needing to feel like you're in the driving seat, aren't you? And in a way, you kind of, I guess you want your mum and anyone else in your life to be in the kind of perhaps in the back seat a bit, kind of like, you know, not telling you how to drive, but very much being supportive and on the journey with you. But you don't want anyone perhaps telling you how to drive exactly. You want to feel that you're making those decisions yourself, but other people are kind of in the wings, supporting you, encouraging you, but not kind of telling you what to do.
No, my gosh. But it's like any teenager, isn't it? It's even now, if people tell me what to do, I'm like, oh, I really struggle with that. You know, everyone wants a bit of empowerment. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
Can you describe as well, because I just think just having you here and being the sort of expert on experience, really, can you tell me as well any other sort of things that your family have done that have been very sort of dolphin-esque, which have been particularly helpful?
Yes, I love that word, dolphin-esque. That is amazing. I've never heard that. I love it. So kind of taking the pressure off, encouraging me to kind of go on my activities, which I once loved. So I love running now, and they encourage me to do that, but not in a forceful way at all. It's just kind of like exploring what I once loved in my childhood before the eating disorder took over. But I am conscious, hang on, am I doing this because I love it or burning calories? If I'm burning calories, not going to do it because that's not helpful. The ways they supported me as well is just getting on with their lives. I know that sounds silly, but when I was really ill, the whole dynamic changed and it was all focused on me, which is pressure. But carry on with your lives. And I know that's so difficult. Honestly, if you know your child is struggling with an eating disorder, it's like, well, how can I even concentrate? But the more you live your own life and you role model that actually you're really holistic and actually there is a life outside of the eating disorder and look how great it is. And if you manage and regulate your own emotions, then you can co-regulate with your child and your child is more likely to feel calm. It's kind of like emotional contagion. You know, eating disorder is really infectious. It wants to get in everyone's head. It wants it to be all consuming. But if you carry on with your lives, do your things, see your friends, look after yourself as well, then, you know, your daughters and sons will echo and model that and go, oh, you know, my eating disorder is not the most important thing in the world. And actually you're going swimming and actually you're going out with your mates and that looks really fun. So that was really helpful as well. I would say as well, in my recovery, going out with friends and going out for foods with my boyfriend has helped me so much. I think there's this kind of internalized shame if you eat on your own. If I'm honest, I still have that. But my boyfriend has been so encouraging of going out and cooking food and actually go out with your friends and have what your friends are having. I know there's calories on the menu right now, which I just think is awful. I think, you know, we look at obesity, but what about the prevalence of eating disorders? But if you struggle with that, say to your friends, do you know what, I'll have what you're having, and eat with your friends and make it a social thing so it gets rid of that shame, because food is really social and it's really pleasurable. So I think that helps as well.
Yeah, brilliant. I think just such golden advice. Thank you, Ella. The sort of social side, it's just kind of like trying to be normal, isn't it? You know, when I say normal, I'm saying that with inverted commas, because what is normal? There is no kind of normal really, but as well, having, you know, being able to though engage in normal things. Because I think the trouble with an eating disorder is that you can become really withdrawn, can't you? And you can almost be kind of feel perhaps a bit labeled with this mental health condition. So you feel very separate from your friends and your peers, and then that isolates you more, and the eating disorder probably is something to cling to more. So I think just great tips there. And also I think, you know, like you're talking about, like with your family and just seeing them going out and living their lives, because it is so understandable to get so drawn in, isn't it, to be perhaps kangarooing and focusing on the eating disorder so much. But again, it doesn't actually help. It almost kind of feeds the eating disorder, doesn't it? It's just great to hear you saying these things out loud as someone who's kind of been in the trenches very recently and has first-hand experience.
Yeah, totally. And I would say, you know, there are days where I still feel in the trenches, but it's kind of a process of just taking it day by day, and also don't beat yourself up. If yesterday you felt, oh, it was a bit, just try again today. You know, just keep trying, keep pushing through, and it definitely does get better. But I definitely agree with the whole eating disorder, Harriet, you mentioned about, it's really ironic because eating disorder like fuels isolation, but then the eating disorder can almost become your friend, a really, really bad friend, a very unhealthy friend, you know, a terrible friend, but a friend, because you rely on it. And, you know, if the world feels scary, you've got that eating disorder to go to. And I do believe that eating disorder is absolutely not the whole individual. It's a part of you, and it's become a nasty voice, and it's kind of like a bullying friend. And actually, what do you do you know, with an actual friend who bullies you? You get rid of it, and you try and get rid of it, and it's really difficult to get rid of it. But that's kind of like the eating disorder. It's a voice. It's not a very nice friend, and it's not all of you. It's part of you, and it's really difficult. But it's very mean to you, and it bullies you, and it tells you lies, and it tells you things that just aren't true.
So Ella, you've obviously done a lot of work on yourself. You said you've had different therapies over the years, different therapists, and it sounds like, you know, the combination of all those different interventions has actually been really helpful for you. Could you share some of perhaps the key things from therapy that have really helped you along this road?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say in my earlier time, it was the therapist who kind of advised me to do psychology or suggested it, kind of delved into my early childhood, kind of me to think about little Ella and 8-year-old Ella who thought she was fat from eating a cake, and kind of nurture her. And oh my gosh, I cried. My eyes were so red. And initially I was like, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. But when you really get into that, it's like, oh gosh, I have a lot of empathy for you. And it's kind of a reminder of taking you through the childhood process and what happened. And that gave me great knowledge and understanding. But I think sometimes it made me feel a bit stuck. It's like, okay, I know all this knowledge, where to go now? Recently, I've had a nutritionist and a CBT therapist, and that's been so useful. I think it's really good to have a nutritionist because it says, look, this is actually what you need to maintain your set point. You know, we've all got different bodies, but this is what you need to function, you know. And then the CBT therapist helped me on my journey, because she kind of said, okay, what are the thoughts that are stopping you? And I'd have to like explore those thoughts and write down those thoughts and then challenge them. And what I noticed as well, it was always the same thing. So it wasn't necessary to do with food, because once you kind of eat a consistent diet, it becomes other thoughts. So it's like, and it all boils down to, I'm not good enough. Others are going to reject me. I'm going to get fired. You know, they're not going to like me. It boils down to that. It wasn't about the food. It was about the core beliefs. And I think once a therapist encourages you to kind of blur out the foods, but finds out what's going underneath for you. Is it that you don't feel good enough? Is it that you don't feel attractive? Is it you feel a bit lonely? And then you can kind of work with it and go, actually, these are the beliefs that I've developed in childhood, but they're not necessarily true. And what can help me? How can I reframe this? What can I do? I think, finding activities you really enjoy helps. And the analogy of, forgive me if I say it incorrectly, but it was really powerful when she said it, and I hope I could do it justice. But it's kind of like going on a train and you rip up pieces of paper and you throw them to keep the tigers out. And you keep doing that, keep ripping the paper, throw out the windows to keep the tigers away. And if you're constantly doing that throughout your life, nothing changes. You have to stop throwing the paper and think, okay, if the tiger's going to come and eat me, they're going to come and eat me. And it's the same with eating and food. Okay, what if I put on loads of weight? What if I feel out of control? Well, if I don't try and if I don't risk, I'll never know. And there's a risk of being rejected. There's a risk of being abandoned. There's a risk of, putting on millions and millions of weight, which won't happen. But those are your fears. But if you keep starving, if you keep restricting, nothing's going to change. And if you keep ripping the paper and throw it out the way, the tigers won't come, but you won't realize that the tigers don't exist in the first place. And that's kind of like facing your fears. Just do it. Try and, a week and see, do your fears come true? Risk it. Am I rejected by everyone, or am I able to live a more rich and happy life? And it's so scary. It is so scary. I think with the support and knowing, okay, I'm going to take risk. I'm going to take a step in, and it's going to be very uncertain. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just going to try it. And I think once you try it and given it a few months, you're like, oh my God, my fears, the worst fears don't come true. I'm not rejected. I'm still loved. And actually, I'm loved for being me. Because when you're starving yourself, it's not like you never believe you can be unconditionally accepted and loved. But you find out, wow, I have unconditional love and acceptance, and actually I'm free. But the process you have to risk, and that's really difficult. But that's what the most recent CBT therapist taught me, and that was extremely beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like such valuable advice, because I think so often we get caught in our heads, don't we, of sort of overthinking things and, just going round and round and round with our sort of thoughts, but not actually taking any different action. And obviously, when we're caught up in our thoughts, we can sort of catastrophize, can't we? And just like you're talking about in a way, like expecting these tigers almost to come and get you. But it's through action and almost taking those steps out of your comfort zone that you can experiment, and also, I guess, get new information. Because if you're just thinking in your head about what's going to happen, you don't really get the chance. If you're not actually acting it out, you don't get the chance to gather new information, do you, and to challenge those beliefs. But it sounds like for you, through taking the action, stepping out your comfort zone, you're kind of still here, you've survived. And sometimes the tigers don't come, and I guess perhaps even if the tiger did come, you're still here anyway.
Yeah, I'll work with the tiger. You've got to take risks, and it's so scary. And I think as well, Harriet, the more you avoid, the bigger the fear grows. It's like with anything, right? So basically, I lost my driving license. Yeah, I didn't apply for one for like 3 months. I've grown a massive fear. I am petrified of getting a driver's license because I avoided it. And I did it today, and I thought, oh, that wasn't too bad. And I think, people with an eating disorder, the more you avoid food, the bigger the fear gets. And it's this massive thing because you avoid. And I think avoidance causes anxiety, and anxiety causes avoidance. So if you stop avoiding and gently introduce, what I found really useful as well is the traffic light system. So you can kind of put in what is your scariest food. So scariest for me was chocolate red. And then amber would be pasta, not so scary. And then green would be sweet potato. And you can go through a process of saying, right, I'll do the green foods first, sweet potato I'll eat. Then the amber foods, I'll try a bit of pasta. And then when you feel a bit more comfortable, but you'll never feel that comfortable, eat the chocolate. So it's kind of a process. But I know for other people, what works is going all in, just saying, right, I'm just going to have, what I want. But for me, it was the kind of gradual process work for me personally.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, because I think for many people, actually breaking it down into the small incremental steps is the way that just makes it more manageable. And, I think, as we were saying before we sort of came on live on the podcast, there's no kind of right way to recover, is there? It's very individual. And for some people, perhaps just going all in head first in the deep end, absolutely, that's what they want to do. But I know from my experience, I think for many people sometimes just taking those little steps and almost like adjusting your comfort zone bit by bit just makes it a bit more doable sometimes.
Yeah. And it's like every time I have breakfast, I'm like, I feel so empowered now. It's like a really gradual process, but it's like, oh, I can do this and that. Because every time you challenge those negative thoughts, you're disproving them. You're going, actually, no, I am worthy. And then you find out that when you disprove those negative thoughts, everyone has negative thoughts, but the negative thoughts that are in other aspects of life, you go, hang on, I haven't listened to you when I ate my breakfast. I'm not going to listen to you in this. And slow and gradual steps, your self-esteem and your sense of self-empowerment gradually increases. And it's a beautiful process. It's tricky. But yeah, I agree with you. For me personally, anyway, it's a gradual process of going, yeah, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that. And then it grows, your self-esteem grows. And yeah, it's lovely.
So Ellie, you've touched on several different elements that have really helped you, like the psychology and the nutritionist and the different kinds of therapy you've had, social eating, kind of going out with your boyfriend and having purpose and meaning and something sort of that's distraction away from yourself. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the whole kind of mix that you think has been really instrumental in your recovery?
I think feeling my feelings and saying my needs. I think for people with eating disorders, again, so caring and sensitive, and you've probably repressed so many emotions and you don't really know what your feelings are and you don't really know how to say your needs. And I am a massive people pleaser. So saying my needs is horrific. Before I say how I actually want to feel and think, oh, this might cause a bit of stir or the other person might not like to hear it, every time I do it, I'm like, oh, yay. And the outcome is never as bad as I think. So I think, it could be little things like someone annoyed you or someone said a comment and you didn't agree with it or it was a bit mean. If you say, oh, I didn't really appreciate that comment, or if you're knackered on the weekend and you'll go, I've done this, I do this, I do this. And then you're like, actually, I really want a weekend to have a bath and read a book and drink hot chocolate. Say, do you know what? I've had a really stressful week. What I need right now is a weekend. And you're able to give more. I think, again, people with eating disorders, caring and sensitive and wonderful people, but they can neglect their own needs. So I think saying their needs and finding out what do I need today, even though it can be really tricky, really works. And also not saying yes to everything. I'm such a yes woman. I'm like, yes, I'll do this. And then I'm like, oh gosh, I can't do this. So just pausing before saying yes to people works for me as well.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I know that's definitely something I have struggled with in my own recovery. It's quite addictive, isn't it? People pleasing. Because I think when you're really used to creating harmony, going with the flow, being tuned into other people's feelings, and also you don't often realize you're doing it, do you? I don't know if you found this, but it almost just becomes a default way of being that if someone even asked you, I think back in the day when I was struggling, if someone had asked me, what do you think or feel about this? I just wouldn't have had a clue because I was so tuned into everybody else.
Yeah, I was like, I feel how you feel. But I do think that's a survival strategy, like developed in childhood. Like fight, freeze, and fawn. Fawn is the new survival strategy. So this is why people pleasing is so hard not to do, because you think to survive, to live, I need to people please. I need to make sure everyone's okay. But actually, are you okay? And the more love you give yourself, the more you're able to give love to others. And you really deserve that because, for the listeners to your podcast, I believe they're wonderful, empathetic, attuned people. And like, imagine if you gave yourself half the love you give to everyone else, and you deserve all that love. You really do. But it can be so tricky at the same time. But yeah, it's very tricky, isn't it, Harriet? I still do it now.
Yeah, it's really a hard thing to break. And I think, like you're saying, though, it's a survival strategy, isn't it? It's not something that anyone's doing to be manipulative or, it's something that you're just doing to survive. And it, like you said, it's something we probably did from early in childhood. So it's got quite deep roots, hasn't it? It feels very unnatural not to please all the time.
Oh, so unnatural. It's icky, isn't it, saying your needs? It's so icky. But then after you're like, yeah, that's not so icky. And actually, I feel good for it.
Yeah. Well, Ella, I just want to thank you so much. I think you have just offered up so much great advice and support and information there, and been really open with your story, being incredibly vulnerable, which I think is so helpful, just to kind of really get such a deep understanding, and also for sharing all the information about your family and the animal model as well. I think that's just kind of golden for people to be able to hear what really helps, because I think it goes against our intuition as well sometimes, doesn't it? What feels logical, we feel like as a parent we need to rhino, we need to kangaroo and Joey, and so hearing you just talking about some of these themes has just been really invaluable. So thank you for everything you've shared.
Oh, no, thank you. Honestly, it's been absolutely amazing to kind of share my experience and the opportunity to come in and talk to you. As I said, I've listened to you for so many years. You've helped me so much. So I'm like, I'm very excited and I'm glad I can help those who listen to this podcast.
So Ella, where can people find you or reach out to you? Because I'm sure some people will want to touch base with you after this, after sort of hearing your story, and it will really resonate with some of the things you've been talking about.
Yeah, so my Instagram is Ella_Wills. So Wills is WILLSS. And yeah, you can find me on there. I'm literally happy to answer any questions anyone has, because, I'm 27 now, and the process to have been really difficult. For anyone who kind of has any more questions or wants support with their recovery, or just someone to kind of like relate to what they're going through, I am here. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Ella. So I'll make sure I put your Instagram contacts in the show notes, and I'm sure you will get people reaching out to you.
Lush. Thank you, Harriet.
So I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did, and do go and check out all of Ella's info in the show notes. If you're not following me already, do seek me out on Instagram at @theeatingdisordertherapist_. And for further support with your relationship with food, do go to theeatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. If you enjoy this podcast, I'd be so grateful if you would follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.